In the last lecture, we built up the machinery of static timing analysis from scratch. Timing graphs, arrival time, required time, slack. You now know what those words actually mean. But we left one question hanging. What exactly is a setup violation and how does one happen? That's what this lecture is about. We are going to take a real register to register path, wire up the numbers, and watch a perfectly good design turn into a failing one, step by step, just by changing some delays. By the end, you'll be able to look at any timing path, compute the slack yourself, and know immediately whether it passes or fails. Let's go. The register to register path is the fundamental unit of synchronous design. Almost every timing analysis you'll ever do comes back to this structure. Here's how it works. A clock edge hits the first flip-flop FF1 and it launches new data from its Q output. That data races through combinational logic. In our example, a NAND gate, a wire, an inverter, and a NOR gate, and it has to arrive at the D input of FF2 before the next clock edge captures it. Each element in that chain consumes time. The flip-flop has a clock to Q delay before its output even moves. The logic gates each have propagation delays. The wire adds more delay through resistance and capacitance. All of the delay adds up, and the clock has a hard deadline. The entire job of setup timing analysis is making sure that the accumulated delay fits inside the available window, every time on every path across the whole chip. Let's talk about what the clock is actually doing during all this. There are two clock events that define every timing path. The first one is the launch edge, the rising edge that triggers FF1 to update its output and push tune data into the logic. The second is the capture edge, the next rising edge one clock period later that triggers FF2 to sample whatever's arrived at its input. Between those two edges is your entire timing budget. Data leaves FF1 shortly after the launch edge, after the clock to Q delay. It then has to navigate through all the combinational logic and arrive at FF2 before the capture edge hits. That window, one clock period, is all you have. And as we'll see, it is not even the full period because the flip-flop needs a little extra margin at the end. That brings us to setup time. Here's something that surprises a lot of students the first time they see it. A flip-flop can't capture data right at the moment the clock edge arrives. Internally, the flip-flop needs the data to have been stable for a minimum amount of time before that edge. That window is called the setup time, written as T setup. If the data is still transitioning when the clock arrives, even by just a few picoseconds, the flip-flop might latch the wrong value. Or worse, it may enter metastability, a state where the output gets stuck between 0 and 1 and takes an unpredictable amount of time to resolve. In a real chip, that means corrupted data, incorrect behavior, and failures that are almost impossible to debug. So the data can't arrive at the last possible moment. It has to arrive early enough that the full setup window is satisfied before the capture edge hits. That deadline is what the required time represents, and computing it is the next step. We can now write the equation that governs setup timing. On the left side, we have everything that consumes time along the data path. The clock to Q delay of the launch flip-flop, the delay through the combinational logic gates, and the interconnect wire delay. On the right side, we have the available timing budget, the clock period minus the setup time of the capture flip-flop. The condition is simple. The left-hand side must be less than or equal to the right-hand side. That is TCQ plus T logic plus T wire should be less than or equal to T clock minus T setup. If the left side is smaller, data arrives before the deadline. the path passes. If the left side is larger, data arrives after the deadline, you have a setup violation. Everything in setup timing analysis comes back to this inequality. Let's now run some numbers on it. So let's put some real numbers on this path. Same topology as before. FF1 launches data through an AND gate, then a wire, then an inverter, then a NOR gate, arriving at FF2. Here are the delays for each stage. Clock to Q delay of FF1 is 80 picoseconds. The NAND gate contributes 45, the wire contributes 70 picoseconds, the inverter adds 25 picoseconds, and the NOR gate adds 60 picoseconds. These are the numbers STA will accumulate. On the next slide, we'll walk through the addition stage by stage and find out when the signal actually reaches FF2. Let's trace the signal forward through the path. The clock edge fires at time 0. FF1's output switches 80 picoseconds later, that's our starting point. After the NAND, it's 125 picoseconds. After the wire, it's 125 plus 70 or 195 picoseconds. After the inverter, it's 220 picoseconds, and after the NOR gate, it's 220 plus 60 or 280 picoseconds. The signal arrives at FF2's D input at 280 picoseconds. That's the arrival time, the result of forward propagation through the timing graph. Now we need to know the deadline. Is 280 picoseconds good enough? That depends entirely on the clock constraint. The clock period is 40 picoseconds or 400 picoseconds. FF2 has a setup time of 70 picoseconds. That means data must be stable at FF2's input at least 70 picoseconds before the capture edge arrives at 400 picoseconds. So required time is 400 minus 70 or 330 picoseconds. That's the deadline. The data must arrive no later than 330 picoseconds after the launch edge. Look at the numbers carefully alongside the diagram. The capture edge fires at 400 picoseconds. The setup region, the forbidden zone where the data can't be changing, covers the last 70 picoseconds. So the data must be stable by 330 picoseconds. Any later and we are inside the setup window, which means potential metastability. Now let's compute slack. Arrival time is 280 picoseconds. Required time is 330 picoseconds. Slack is 330 minus 280 or plus 50 picoseconds. Positive slack. The data arrives 50 picoseconds before the deadline. The path passes comfortably. Now on the timing diagram, you can see it clearly. The data arrives, stabilizes, and there's a visible gap before the setup region even begins. This gap is your slack. But here's the thing, that 50 picoseconds can disappear very fast. A longer wire after routing, a heavier node, a gate driving more fan out than expected. Let's see exactly how that happens. Same circuit, same clock, but now physical implementation has increased some of the delays. The NAND gate is driving a heavier load after routing. 45 picoseconds become 60 picoseconds. The wire grew longer during placement, 70 to 120. The NOR gate sees higher output capacitance, 60 to 75. So the new arrival time is the sum of these times and works out to 360 picoseconds. Required time hasn't moved, it is still 330 picoseconds. So the slack is 330 minus 360 or minus 30 picoseconds, negative. The signal is arriving 30 picoseconds after the deadline. That's a setup violation. The same path that had a 50 picosecond of margin is now failing by 30 picoseconds, purely because of physical implementation changes with zero change to the logic. This is why you can't just sign off timing after synthesis. The physical design changes everything. So why do delays balloon after placement and routing? There are a few culprits. The biggest one is fan out loading. When a gate drives multiple downstream gates, it's charging and discharging a larger total capacitance. The more load, the slower the output transition and the higher the propagation delay. The second major factor is wire length. After placement, the router has to connect cells that may end up far apart on the chip. Longer wires have higher resistance and capacitance, more RC delay. Together, fan out and wire length can turn a gate that looked fast during synthesis into a critical bottleneck after routing. And the delay you see in synthesis, which uses estimated wire loads, can be very different from what you measure after the real physical wires are in place. This is the gap that post layout STA exists to close. Now, here's a fact that surprises a lot of engineers trained on older technologies. In modern chips, the wire is often slower than the gate. In older processes, gate delay was the dominant contributor to path delay. Transistors were slow enough that the wire was almost an afterthought. But as transistors scaled down and got faster, the wires didn't scale as favorably. Metal resistance stayed stubbornly high. Capacitance between adjacent wires increased, and so over time, interconnect delay starts dominating. In our example path, logic delay contributes 150 picoseconds. Interconnect contributes 210 picoseconds, more than the logic itself. This means that optimizing gates alone is often not enough. You also have to shorten wires, reduce fan out, and place cells closer together. Modern timing closure is as much a physical problem as it is a logical one. In a real design, there are millions of timing paths, and most of them pass timing easily. But there's always one or a handful that are the bottleneck. That worst path is called the critical path. It's the path with the least slack, and it's the one that limits how fast your chip can run. If you want to increase the clock frequency, the critical path is what you have to fix first. Now, critical paths tend to share common characteristics: deep logic with many gates in series, long interconnects spanning large distances on the chip, or high fan out gates that are slow to drive their loads. STA tools identify these paths automatically and rank them by slack. Design teams then focus their optimization effort on the top violators, fixing them one by one until the whole design closes timing. And here's the important nuance: fixing one critical path often reveals a new one underneath it. Timing closure is an iterative process, not a one shot fix. So you have a setup violation. What do you actually do about it? The most direct fix is gate sizing. Standard cell libraries contain multiple drive strength versions of every gate. A 2x version of a NAND gate can drive twice the load with lower delay, typically at the cost of more area and power. In our example, upsizing the NAND from 1 to 2 drops its delay from 60 to 40 picoseconds, which directly improves slack. Another common technique is buffer insertion, placing a strong buffer midway along a long wire to break up the RC delay. When violations are more severe, you may need logic restructuring, rebalancing a deep logic tree to reduce the number of gates in series, or even pipeline insertion, which splits a long path across two clock cycles at the cost of added latency. Each fix has trade offs. Gate sizing costs area and power. Pipelining adds latency. The art of timing closure is choosing the right technique for each violation to meet timing without blowing the budget on everything else. So let's lock in what we've covered. Every synchronous path follows the same structure: a launch flop, combination logic, and a capture flip flop. Setup timing analysis checks that the data gets through before the capture clock edge. The governing equation is TCQ plus T logic plus T wire should be less than T clock minus T setup. The left side is what the path costs, The right side is the budget the clock gives you. Slack is the difference between required time and arrival time. Positive slack, path passes. Negative slack, setup violation. Real designs fail timing because physical implementation increases delays beyond what synthesis estimated. Longer wires, heavier loads, and high fan out are the usual cases. The critical path is the bottleneck that limits clock frequency, and closing timing means systematically fixing violations through gate sizing, buffering, and logic restructuring. In the next lecture, we flip to the other side of the problem, hold timing, a completely different constraint that fails when signals arrive too fast rather than too slow. It's subtle, it's often misunderstood, and it can cause failures that only show up at certain operating conditions.